You are listening to Beyond the Verse, a Star Citizen podcast. A show dedicated to Cloud Imperium games, Star Citizen, and Squadron 42. Whether you fight, explore, unite, and or trade, we bring you news, updates, interviews, reviews, and analysis. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a pour of Radegast, and join us as we go Beyond the Verse.
Launch sequence activated.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Beyond the Verse, Star Citizen podcast. I'm your host, Solus, and on today's episode, we are going to be covering where in the world is patch 324, as well as our roadmap roundup, the Inside Star Citizen about hangars and freight, and we're going to end the episode with the Whitley's Guide to the Anvil Carrack. I know in the last episode we discussed going over the RSI manufacturer history, but there's been a couple of things that have happened in this last week that has taken my attention, all actually Star Citizen worthy. So I've teased a little bit of this in previous episodes, but my community just started the ARC. It is a bonus episode in the Beyond the Verse podcast lineup, available now if you wanted to go and listen to it, but it's essentially a book club. And we're going to be getting into these epic sagas that deal with space in order to help us kill time between patches, and as we wait for 324 and as we wait for Star Citizen 1.0 and Squadron 42. And so I've called this episode Killing Time for many reasons. One, yes, I want to introduce Red Rising, the ARC. Again, please go listen to that episode. It's getting a resounding reception. And it was a fun conversation about Pierce Brown's novel. It is good. There's a book series of, I think, 6 of them. The 7th is impending, hopefully by next year, but it is a great series. But I'm also calling this Killing Time because there is an ongoing or increasing sentiment in the Star Citizen community about the delays. And so I would not be doing my due diligence as a content creator or as a podcaster for Star Citizen if I didn't address this growing sentiment. And so before we get into any of that, that's what we can look forward to in this episode, I wanted to take a step back and talk about business for just a little bit. Next week, my family and I are going on our family vacation. If you've been a long-time listener of this show, I routinely go to Corpus Christi or Mustang Island with the kiddos, spend time on the beach. It's a great time, but it is a Monday through Friday, so I miss literally all things Star Citizen. I try to update with like TikTok videos, and I'll stay engaged with the community, but you can expect not an Org Night episode, a bonus episode, and more than likely episode 68 will either be pushed out a day, like maybe Friday night or Saturday, or I'll just wait and record it the following week. So we'll just miss a week of recording. So stand by for that. That's why I didn't go anywhere. Well, my my passion for podcast creation didn't go anywhere. I will be physically going somewhere for the next week. So heads up there. Again, if you want to join our in-game Soul Provision organization, it's called Soul Provision. We are starting a book club. And again, it's called The Arc. It's based off of Star Citizen's The Arc. In the TIAC system, it's the archive of all literature and knowledge. So I kind of tie that into this book review, but we had a blast. The episode's about an hour and 28 minutes. It started off with me and one other Soul Provision member. A second Soul Provision member joined us about halfway through. But again, we just talk through the main points. It's spoilers. I would not join it if you don't want anything spoiled. But it is. It goes to the story of Darrow. It's basically Katniss Everdeen. It's the Hunger Games. It's Star Wars. It's Game of Thrones. It's the political intrigue and one house versus another house. It's exciting. But we have to be doing these things. We have to be doing these things because otherwise we end up as a salty backer just bitching and complaining on social media about how we're waiting for 324. So let's just go straight into this. Again, by the definition of a podcast, everything is a monologue, but I'm going to call this my monologue segment. It is my soapbox. You can fast forward if you don't want to listen to it, but it's more of a reminder. It's a call to action. It is hopefully me being able to relate to every single one of you listeners and viewers. So here's my attempt at that. Number one, no one joins Star Citizen. No one gets into Star Citizen expecting this thing to release in the next couple of weeks or months, even next year. No one does. If you're introducing Star Citizen to a friend, what's the first thing you tell them? Hey, this is a game that's been in development for 11 years. You kind of lay that foundation from the very beginning. Nothing's changed, and I think for my mental health, nothing will change. I'm not thinking 1.0 is coming out next year. I'm not thinking that we're going to have a finished product. I joke and say that my kids will inherit my hangar and then finally be able to play whenever they're my age when the game launches. It's a joke. We have fun with it. It's lighthearted. You're not wrong in the way that you're feeling and the way that you're reacting. You're not. But I think we need to remember that we've all accepted that reality that we are needing to be a patient community. And I think for the most part, most of us are. Now, I'll be my own devil's advocate. That doesn't mean we just let things go. It doesn't mean that we just take it across the chin and say, now wait a minute, we were promised in January certain deliverables by Q3 or in the first half of 2024, and they haven't come to fruition. I think we should bring those up and say, wow, okay, so maybe why did that happen? Is there a tech reason? Is it a resource reason? Maybe they allocated a lot of their efforts into Squadron 42 and trying to get that out the door. I don't know. I don't have any of those anecdotes. There's not like a report that comes out that says, hey, here's what we chose to do instead of our promise that we made in January. We got the roadmap roundups. We have the monthly reports, but it doesn't give us like a timeline. In fact, we're still lacking some of the roadmap roundups or updates. We're still lacking that path, right? The roadmap specifically for the next several months or years. So it's not that we should just stay quiet, take it across the chin, don't say anything. We should have an outlet, whether it's within your community or even on social media, that's fine. But I think where I find the point of creating a whole podcast episode about it and entitling my podcast Killing Time, I think when I get to that point is when there feels like there's no hope. Like on my social media feed, and I follow a lot of positive individuals, people are just leaving. Like not abandoning Star Citizen, but they're, going to Cyberpunk, Red Dead Redemption, Stardew Valley. Some of these, Steam just had their summer, event. I bought a couple of games. I'm actually back into Red Dead Redemption. Like I'm also going to other games. But there's this what am I trying to say? There's a huge influx, or it's outflux. What's the opposite of influx? There's this huge departure of Star Citizen at this current moment. But there's also the bitching and the griping and the complaining. Yes, 324 continues to be an evocati. It continues to get pushed to the right. They just started the RMQ. I have it in front of me. The RMQ tech preview that started a couple of days ago in the tech preview channel, again for evocati. Is that what is impacting the PU? Right? We don't have a lot of details, but right now the servers are on fire. It is very, very difficult to even find something to do in game because the servers are horrendous. And usually, and this is why I'm surmising like this, usually it's around when an evocati patch drops. I don't know the tech background. My understanding was that the PU is on the AWS, the Amazon Web Services servers, and the Evocati, I'm not gonna say local, but it's on like it's on like a segregated server set. So if that is true, sure, fine. But I think it has something to do with the RMQ, the replication. It's like a table in the background. I can't explain it. There's not a lot of details on it, but there's just a new RMQ layer that's happening in the tech preview. That might be resource dependent. And that might be resource dependent on both AWS servers and whatever the Evocati server is on. But ever since that dropped, it has been so very difficult to do anything, right? So, yeah, last night, y'all know at this point, Thursday nights are Soul Provisions org nights. We were supposed to do a mining night, and for the most part, we were able to get to the air and halo belt. But that's about it. Things were delayed. Watching the measurables, right, whenever you're mining, like watching those percentages, they were delayed. We had asteroids blowing up prematurely. It was just very difficult really to do anything. We were glitching through the Caterpillar. I was glitched and had to be incapacitated, brought back into the Caterpillar, revived. That might sound kind of normal, but it happens more frequently in these moments, right? Of these moments of testing. So even the PU's on fire. So we don't want to just take it. I've said this maybe 3 or 4 times already. We don't want to just take it across the chin, but at the same time, go do something different. Go do something different. Get into your community. And as a community manager myself, like I'm trying to find ways to keep my community engaged. Hence the ARC book review. We are trying to create merchandise. We're trying to create commercials. We're trying to do an outreach. So for the 150 individuals that are in Soul Provision, there's something. Maybe not for everybody, but there's something. And so we're just killing time. And so at the end of each podcast over on Spotify, they did get rid of the Q&A, unfortunately. But in the comment section, I would love to hear, what are you doing to kill time between patches and while you wait for 324 or 4.0 or Squadron 42? I would love to learn. I would love to know what is driving the community. What are you doing? What are my listeners and viewers doing to try to stay positive? Because right now, things are very, very toxic. All right, I said my piece. React to that. Comment section, go for it. We'll talk about it. So with that being said, let's actually go to our first segment. Let's go to From the Community, where we'll get into the polls and the comment section from last week's episode. Here we go.
Incoming message.
All right, sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube. Here is the poll question asked from episode 66. We call Jump Points in Star Citizen. The question was, is 3 minutes too long for travel inside of a jump point? Let us know your overall reaction to jump points in the comment section. Here are the results. I gave you the option of less than 3 minutes. 3 minutes feels about right, or I would be open to longer. And the reason why we're calling those 3 minutes is last week's Inside Star Citizen said that the average jump would take about 3 minutes of navigating. So I was surprised to see the winner of this poll. The winner of this poll was 50% said I would be open to longer. I did not see that coming. 3 minutes to me seems very long. Again, just for the next couple of minutes, pause the podcast episode and just look at the clock for 3 minutes. 3 minutes takes a very long time when all you're doing is staying within a circle, right? Because like the tunnel you're flying through, you're going to have to navigate. They said something about like stalagmites, like little pillars that you'd have to fly around. So it might be a little engaging in that sense. But for the most part, you're staying within like the bounds of a circle. And so as long as you're doing that for 3 minutes. I feel like that is a long time. But surprisingly, 50% of the listeners said that you'd be open to longer. Awesome. I wonder how long though. How long would be too long for you? Comment section. All right, right behind that at 37.5%, 3 minutes feels just about right. And then 12.5% say less than 3 minutes. So again, I would probably put myself, like for me, 3 minutes feels max. And then nothing more than 3 minutes, in my personal opinion. Going on to the comment section, again, this is open for anybody to comment on anything. And of course, Groza. Groza leaves us some treasure that we can go through. The first comment was from Marauder. I'm okay with 3 minutes and would be open to longer at some point. The travel mechanics need to reflect the fact that you're traversing an entire star system. It should not be a trivial matter to jump between systems. However, I also understand there's a simulation game balance that has to be considered. And so I agree with Marauder. I am in the camp of more realistic the better. And I know people get really upset when you start talking about realism in a space sim. Okay, tracking. But I think for the purpose of this conversation, you're right. If I'm traveling from Stanton, and I don't know what the furthest system is from Stanton, according to the star map, but if I'm having to go literally across the universe, it should probably be more than 3 minutes. And I should probably have to jump between point to point, refill at their station, and then continue my jumps. Yeah, I agree with that. I think a 3-minute travel from Stanton to Pyro is a little much, but I do agree with having that variance, and it should feel like a distance. It should be a deliberate decision. Like, next week, I am going to go to Nyx or Triac or wherever, or Tyac or whatever system, right? It should be a deliberate action, especially if you're part of an organization. That's also kind of fun. Like, imagine getting 150 Soul Provision members. Imagine getting everybody together in a Javelin and, I don't know, the Endeavor and all your other, Odysseys, your exploration ships, your capital company-sized ships, organization-sized ships, and making that deliberate move from system to system. I think that'd be awesome. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to Groza's comment. That's always fun to unpack. Here we go. Who'd have thought that Marauder, Soul Provision's transport officer and Star Citizen backer of 9 to 10 years, didn't know how to do a simple box delivery mission? +1 for the guide system. Happy to show fresh whippersnappers like him the ropes. People keep telling me I'm a hero for being such a great guide, and you know what? I think they're right. I am a hero. Bring me the cheddar. I love open comments. It's okay if you don't publish this one, Groza. My promise to the community, Groza, was I was going to talk about every comment, good or bad, if you post it into our notes or the comment section. So yeah, we're going to talk about it, buddy. Really funny. So what Groza's referencing is we talked about the Foundation Festival and the guide system and teaching new people. And for every hour spent in a certain category, you would get the paint scheme for a ship. And you'd get a hat and all these other items for helping out in the guide system. Well, the way to cheese that is just get a friend, somebody who's been backing for 9 to 10 years. One of you goes in as a requester of a guide, and the other one goes in as a guide. Do that for an hour and you get your paint. I know that's a cheesed system. I don't know if you'd call it abuse. I mean, theoretically, why would you penalize somebody? Like, let's say I've been backing the game for 2 years, but I've never done racing, which is actually legitimately true. I have never raced in the Star Citizen PU. So why would you penalize me if I'm like, you know what? I actually want a guide. I want a guide. I want somebody to show me how to low fly. I want someone to show me, the ropes of racing around Hurston, please. And I sign up for it as a mentee or as a participant. Yeah, I mean, I don't think the tenure necessarily matters, but you can't really prove abuse. You can't really say like this person with 3 or 4 years tenure is being legit whenever they're trying to figure out how to mine or salvage, but this other person isn't. There's no way. So I don't think there's a way to, for Star Citizen to fairly remove the abuse or remove like what's happening, but it is what it is. It is a thing. It is happening. I think it's a creative way to teach new individuals about Star Citizen. So there we go. Let's get into this week in Star Citizen. Sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube. Go through the article, go through the bullet points, and then we will get into where's Evocati or where's patch 324, roadmap roundup, inside Star Citizen, and the Whitley's Guide lore of the Carrack. Here we go. Star Citizen Alpha 324 continues on its journey towards the live servers. The much anticipated update will bring new features such as a personal and instant hangars, new cargo hauling missions, freight elevators, and storage access, and much more. We appreciate your patience while we work hard to ensure the smoothest experience possible at launch. You can follow the development on Spectrum and stay tuned for wider testing. Looking back at last week, the 200th episode of Inside Star Citizen explored your journey to the Pyro system and beyond, focusing on jump points, how to navigate them, and what has changed since we last saw them. While it's always exciting to preview the future, this episode was particularly meaningful as a unique milestone in our history. We want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for helping us make all of this possible. On the food front, and for those who enjoy diving into Alien Week, we compiled an alien-themed cookbook from all of your recent submissions. We're super appreciative and stuffed from all your delicious recipes and you shared earlier this year during the Super Galactic Xenothreat Smackdown contest. Last weekend, we also attended our very first Bar Citizen in Washington, D.C. Over 150 of you gave us the warmest welcome we could have asked for, and we were thrilled to see organizations meeting in person for the first time, and even a new org forming right at the event. This is what Bar Citizens are all about, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Bullet points are basically our talking points that we're going to go through for the rest of the episode, but Tuesday, they had the Whitley's Guide Anvil Carrack. Wednesday was a roadmap update and roundup. Thursday was Alpha 324's Hangars and Freights on Inside Star Citizen. And then today, after this podcast episode, we have Star Citizen Live Game Dev with John Griffiths. So specifically about that, here's Friday. Star Citizen Live is a game dev episode with John Griffiths, the lead environment artist, where we'll be showcasing the process of building a forward operating base, one of the new modules being added to distribution centers. That begins at 8 a.m. Pacific or 10 a.m. U.S. Central. Yeah, I want to know all about it. At Soul Provision, that's basically all we care about is logistics. We are firm believers that every game loop is around logistics, getting product from one system to another system. We want to focus on that, capitalize on that. Transport leads into trade, which leads into the need for security. We love our logistics loops. Well, the forward operating base and distribution centers, I have all the questions. When you say a FOB, forward operating base, when you say a FOB, I'm going straight military, like my time in the military, what FOBs meant to me. So I would love clarification on what necessarily that means for distribution centers. So super excited to get into later today and talk about it the next episode, which is again like in 2 weeks. Okay, let's get into Evocati's Alpha 324 patch. Okay. Yesterday, they dropped the latest PTU patch for Evocati. It's 9259600. Doesn't mean anything to anybody. But if you look at just the testing and feedback focus, this is what most people get mad about. They don't read on. So they see patch notes and they're like, okay, we're getting closer. Sweet. This means, PTU perhaps next week. Awesome. But they get to the testing and feedback focus portion of the patch notes and they see personal and instance hangars, freight elevators, storage access, hangar decorations, and cargo hauling missions. Not ready for testing, cargo commodity rebalance, dynamic event blockade runner. That has been the case for a month. Nothing has changed on the testing feedback focus and the not ready for testing and feedback. And so people get this and they say, man, what's the point? Why is it still an Evocati? They don't scroll down Now, it doesn't like make everything right, but they don't scroll down past the known issues. The known issues can also be frustrated because they read this and they think, oh, this is still an issue. They haven't addressed this. But you need to go down to the next sections, the features and gameplay, the bug fixes, and the technical. This is the why it is still an Evocati, right? So the known issues is why they're not ready to put it out into the PTU, and the features, gameplay, bug fixes, and technical, this is why it merited its own patch note release. It's because they did do a lot of things to address. And so I'm going to go quickly through this and then maybe wrap up, since we had a whole soapbox segment about killing time. Go through this kind of quickly and then we can move on to the roadmap roundup. So features and gameplay. For artificial intelligence, new light amplification optics added to specific NPC loadouts throughout the PU. Gameplay. Law system towing updates. Awesome. Made towing hostility only hostile to the owner of the ship, and a countdown to the warning for towing. Ships and vehicles. Slightly reduced acceleration and speeds on the Anvil Hornet series ships. Okay, then we go to the bug fixes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 bug fixes from transit locations to ATC locations, specifically about instance hangars, AI Hurston, multiple underground facilities, UGFs, graphics, cargo loops, selling cargo, and the commodity kiosk cargo. There's a list of 12 items that they did address. People think, and I'm one of them, this is not like a belittling statement. People think that patch 324 is just this simple, like, hey, open, instance hangars. We used to have it like 5 or 6 years ago. Just give us the hangars back. It'll be fine. Freight elevators is just cosmetic. It's just an aesthetic thing that happens within your hangar. It's fine. But it is so much more than that. Like, especially with the tech, like the object container streaming, the persistent entity streaming, the replication layer, the entrance into server meshing, like all of these things on the tech background mean it's not just a cosmetic. Everything has an existence. Like, that's what we love about Star Citizen, right? It's things that we brag to our friends about. Everything has an existence. I have a box, I put the box on a planet, I log out for the game. When I log back into the game, that box is there, right? We are happy and we love that about Star Citizen. Well, having an entire new process of getting those actual live assets physicalized into a personal hangar that's theoretically brand new, that's instanced. It's the first time we're really having an instanced moment within the PES, right? It's a larger complication than just flipping a switch and saying, hey, this is releasing. I would actually venture to say that this is one of the biggest updates that ties in game loop with the technology, right? So like 320, 321, like I think 320 was the persistent entity streaming. Then we had the replication layer split in 323, 321. I don't know. I'm getting all the patches mixed up at this point. But like, this is fairly new. It's fairly new. Persistent entity streaming is fairly new. The replication layer split is fairly new. So having all of this happen within cargo hauling, with the freight elevators and the personal hangars, we're going to get into that with Inside Star Citizen. I just think it's more layered and more complex than flipping a switch. And that's where I will leave it here. Again, please respond in the comments. I want to hear how you're killing time, your thoughts on the delays of 324. I wish I could just ask that in a Q&A, but I can't. Not anymore, because they took that away from me. So enjoy the open comment section. I would love to hear from each of you. All right, I said my piece. Roadmap roundup, and there's actually some interesting things that dropped for this week. So I'm going to go ahead and read the notable changes for July 24th. So this is the release expecting for Alpha 4.0. I've had a lot of people respond to me and say, well, at some point in 4.0, it's not necessarily when it first launches. That's not what this is saying, right? If it's sometime within Alpha 4.0, it would say 4.x, right? 4.x means it's committed for just the next big release, the next chapter of Star Citizen, right? But this is 4.0. They're saying that when Pyro launches, when server meshing launches, when we have Alpha 4.0, they are now committing to the RSI Zeus Mark II CL, the Charlie Lima. This is your cargo variant of the Zeus Mark II. Acidic Caves. Implementing the Acidic Cave archetype, coming to both the Pyro and Stanton systems, adorned with luminous pools of water and dramatic here we go. Stalactites. I can't say that word. The stalactites. There we go. Good Lord in heaven. Stalactites and stalagmites. These caves provide a captivating setting for exploration, FPS mission, missing person missions, and more. Rock caves. Implementing the rock cave archetype, coming to both the Pyro and Stanton systems, illuminated by bioluminescent mushrooms. These caves provide a unique atmosphere for exploration, FPS missions, missing person missions, and more. Asteroid bases. Implementing new asteroid bases scattered across space in asteroid clusters, gas clouds, and other areas of Pyro. From exploration-type gameplay to mission-based locations, these bases include both constrained interiors for potential FPS conflicts, as well as space combat while reaching or fleeing from the location. So this is really cool for me too. It's like a brand new, you have like Lagrange stations, obviously you have orbital stations, LEOs, right? Low Earth orbit, I think is what LEO stands for. But you've got all these different types of stations. Now you're having asteroid bases. Super awesome. More places for you to land your ship, get out of your ship, and really go through the Star Citizen loop. I would venture to say that the Star Citizen loop is the ability to go from walking around in first-person shooter mode onto your ship without a single load screen and taking off. That experience is unparalleled in any other game. Being able to do that in different archetypes, in different types of environments, I love everything about that. That's what makes Star Citizen so unique, and now we have asteroid bases to do so. And the last roadmap update, space stations, called contested zones. Contested zones are a location feature coming to Pyro space stations, introducing FPS gameplay with various layouts tailored for this purpose. The zones will feature a progression system requiring tokens to unlock different zones, giving access to the loot inside. Collecting all of the tokens will allow a player to open the final door and claim the grand prize. What does that sound like to you? It sounds like raids, doesn't it? It kind of sounds like a dungeon or a trial or a raid, depending on what game I'm referencing. It's that group play that you're going to team up together, defeat a quote-unquote boss, which it sounds like here is just a lot of people, but defeat a boss and get their loot. Very cool. All coming in Alpha 4.0. Exciting. So now the question becomes, let me just get this out of the way. So now the question becomes, well, if we're waiting for 3.24 for as long as we have been, is this kicking the can down the road for 4.0? 4.0 was promised in Q3. It's starting to feel like a 2025 thing. Okay. I would venture to say that 3.24 and 4.0 are not related. I am pretty sure, theoretically, they could launch 3.24 tomorrow and the very next day launch 4.0. Like, I don't think that one relies on the other. They're already working on server meshing. That is an entirely different thing. Pyro is an entirely different thing. This is where, like I say, they can walk and chew gum at the same time. You've got teams that are building out Pyro, server meshing, and all this, everything we just covered in the roadmap update. At the same time, simultaneously, you've got teams that are working on 324. I don't think 4.0 is reliant on how far we push 324. Now, do I think we're going to see 4.0 in Q3? No, not anymore. Not anymore. I think it's going to hit around CitizenCon. I still think CitizenCon is going to be Squadron 42 themed. I will forever maintain that. I think we'll get release dates and we will get maybe the ability to play some version of Squadron 42 at CitizenCon. But I also think CitizenCon will mark the release of the Polaris. It'll mark the release of Alpha 4.0. I think that's around Citizen Day as well. So I think that'll be when we see the next chapter of Star Citizen. Again, open comment section. When do you think we're going to see Alpha 4.0? Okay, let's get into some fun stuff here. Let's get into Inside Star Citizen. This was a really, really good, let me share my screen. It's a really good episode of like building up anticipation, right? There's already anticipation. There's already this desire to finally have hangars and finally have these new hauling game loops. But we have yet another Inside Star Citizen that just eats away at us. We're like, damn it, I want this like tomorrow. So this is a very fun episode. So I hope you enjoy it. Not a lot of moments to like interject. I will say, if you are listening to this on podcast, you've got to see it. Go to our YouTube channel, watch this podcast, but we do like a screen share and we are showing you the video. So go watch it. It's fun because it shows you the decoration ideas. They don't really talk about it. They talk about how to move things, but they don't really talk about what you're able to see. So go and watch it. So without further ado, let's get into the video.
Alpha 324 is currently in testing, awaiting its release to hungry players like you. And while ISC is moving onward to covering the ongoing development of the upcoming Alpha 4.0 after that, we thought we'd take one last chance to check in with the cargo guru himself, Chad McKinney, and get one last look at how personal persistent hangars, freight elevators, and cargo loading is working. This is Inside Star Citizen, Alpha 324, Hangars and Freight. Let's go.
The first thing, obviously, you spawn into the hub. You can go out into the main section down at the bottom, depending on the station that you're in, meet up with your friends, make sure you're in a party together. At that point, you have lots of options available to you. You can either go to an item bank if you want to grab some smaller items, which there are numerous throughout the station, including actually in the hub that you were just in. The item bank is used to allow players to get smaller items, mainly like FPS style items, without having to go all the way down to a hangar to use the freight elevator kiosk to pull it up from the freight elevator. That's especially useful for things like handguns or undersuits and armor, metapins, food, stuff that you just want to quickly get on your person, and you don't have to wait for like a huge platform to come up in order to grab it. The inventory that the item bank accesses is the same location inventory that the freight elevator accesses. So in fact, you can do things like put something into your location inventory via the item bank, and then later on decide you want to get it back while you're in your hangar. And you can do that via the freight elevator kiosk or any of the other item banks that are in the hangars.
And while you and your group members are certainly welcome in your new personal persistent hangar, questions still abound about what happens when an unwelcome guest sneaks in.
If someone gets into your hangar, there is a trespassing timer that will start ticking. After like 30 seconds or so, they're going to get automatically kicked out. In addition, we have changed the rules in the hangar to make it allow the same kind of like non-armistice zone behavior that the ships do. So we are modifying it to where you can shoot people that even trespass inside your hangar and not get a infraction for it. At your home location, it will be your personal hangar, but if you go to a different place in the verse, then that hangar that was given to you is what we call a public hangar, but you're still the person that like has authority over it. So while you do, you have the same kind of rights.
In many ways, these new hangars are your first home ownership in the verse, with not only the ability to defend yourself against intruders without getting a crime stat, but also your first abilities to customize and decorate your space as you see fit.
The personal hangars are kind of the first real ownership in the world for the players. We've had ownership with the ships, which is great. You've been able to keep things inside them for some time now and, you know, kind of customize it that way. But this is the first kind of like home, the first place in the world that actually is yours. And it's allow you to store furniture, you can store boxes, cargo if you want to stockpile, and be kind of clever with trading. Anything that, you know, any flair, anything that you want that will help make it feel like home. But it's not the end. We have lots of plans for the future. You know, you've seen things with all the base building updates, and also we've talked in the past about things like persistent habs, etc. So there's more that's going to be coming along this vein, but the personal habs are the first big step of ownership in the world for players.
With armistice zones now removed from hangars, Persistence allows players to now set their most used items out for easy access before any launch. You can display your firearms, ship items, and more however you'd like. And in future releases beyond Alpha 324, this will include display cases for armor as well.
Basically, almost anything in your inventory you'll be able to pull up via either the item bank or the freight elevator, and then you can directly leave them around in your hangar. Now, you do have to be careful about, like, if you want to call up a ship, leaving things on the platform may block it, so that could cause issues. However, we did expand the size of the hangars in order to give you more space in there to do exactly this. So we want to make it both easier experience to get in and out of some of these hangars, as well as give you more space in order to decorate it and make it feel like your own place. In addition to all that, another change that we've made is we've reclassified many ships in the game that were previously attributed to small hangars now to the medium-sized hangars, so that they are a more comfortable fit as far as landing, and then in addition to that also to make it more reasonable for maybe the amount of cargo or the items that you're moving in.
The physicalizing of most items and the addition of freight elevators and new kiosks in Alpha 324 to work with them not only in your hangar but at mission locations throughout the verse means a fundamental shift in the manner and time it takes to load and offload your ship or vehicle.
So I said this a couple of Inside Star Citizens ago, but what you're seeing here and what you just heard Jared say is like the mining facilities that you see on planet side, they now have the freight elevators there. That to me is that's incredible, right? Because like how many times are you out in the verse thinking, man, I really wish I had X, Y, Z, and then you would have to go all the way back to like an orbital station like Seraphim Station, or heaven forbid your residential area like Orison. But now you can just go to a mining facility, go to the freight elevator, and have access to your inventory. That is a quality of life improvement that was much needed in the verse.
For both manual and automatic loading, you're going to be doing something at the moment that's going to be some kind of commodity transfer. Whenever you go to the commodity terminal to do a transaction, you're presented with two different options. You can either deliver directly into your location inventory or pick a ship from a list that's at that location and have it automatically packed into that ship for you. If you decide to deliver it into the location inventory, you'll buy it. There's no restriction on what you buy. It'll just go directly into it. As long as you have capacity in the inventory and the money to pay for it, you can do it. At that point, it's up to you if you've bought it to get it onto your ship or to move it to wherever, or just sit on it. So you can just like hang out, wait until the prices look good, and then later on decide to move it to a different location. From there, if you decided to manually load it, you can load it onto the ship, call ATC, go to a different location in the game, land at a different location, go into the spaceport, and then access the same commodity terminal there, look at the prices, and make a determination about whether you want to sell anything on your ship. At that point, you can make what we call like a sell order. And this is basically like a declaration, kind of like a contract that says like, I will deliver these goods and you will give me this payment for it. When you've done that, at that point, you can go back to your hangar, move the goods off of the ship onto the freight elevator platform, use the freight elevator kiosk to put it down into the location inventory. You'll get a little screen that pops up that tells you, here's the sell order that you had, here's the price that we agreed to, you've now delivered everything, check, and then you get the payment that's delivered. And the reason why we do that is actually to remove a round trip. So this gives a way for players to kind of like skip a step in the flow and help make things a little bit more smooth. On the flip side, if you just want to deliver it into your location inventory at the new location, you can do it like that as well. And then once you're inside the spaceport, sell it from the location inventory instead, or just sit on it until another point in time. On the automatic side, whenever you go to buy the goods, the ship needs to be stowed at that location. At that point, the ship will be locked down, so you can't call it to fly it off while the loading's in process. You also have to pay a little bit more in order to fund the movement by the local services in order to actually move the cargo onto your ship for you. Once the timer has run out, you go down to the ASOP terminal. You can spawn your ship or retrieve the ship from the ASOP terminal, get in the ship. All the boxes should be there. You can fly off to another place and then do the inverse at a different location. The other thing is that you can mix and match these. So you can decide to manually load the boxes from your location inventory onto your ship, but then automatically unload them or vice versa. It's really up to you about how you want to do it. Like maybe you decide that you don't mind unpacking it because maybe it's a little bit easier once everything's already in there. Or you can decide that for certain sizes of shipments, like for a few small boxes, you don't mind moving it, but maybe for like a really big load in a C2 where there's like a lot of things going on, you'd rather just kind of, use the automatic loading service. Now, what we went out with before wasn't really our intended behavior. Because what was missing was some granularity in the loading time determination based on the box size. It was always the plan, we just weren't able to get to it yet. So I know that there was some feedback that some of the loading times seemed to not make sense. This is the reason. The reason is that we didn't have the granularity in the system to scale the loading times based on the box size. And what that really means is that for smaller boxes per SEU, you're going to spend more time on smaller boxes. So if you have, let's say, a ship and you fill it up with 600 SEU, if those are like 1 SEU boxes, that's going to take a long time because that's a lot of boxes to move. But if we're talking 32 SEU boxes, that's a much more efficient moving pattern that has to be done by the loading services, so that's going to be quicker to load. And that'll help us tune the system to make sure that we're not overly punishing people with these incredible loading times. But we still want it to, be a reasonable amount of time for the higher loads for us to be able to tune the economy in a reasonable way, and also to make sure that manual loading is something that there is an incentive to do.
Of course, with these new kiosks and new ways to access your inventory, for those of you who have been building your possessions year after year, one question was destined to rise above all others.
Search is another one of these things that we always wanted to do. Now that we've been longer in development, trying to close out and finish off some of the bigger bugs, which has mainly been hangar instancing related. We've also taken the opportunity to work on the quality of life improvement that we wanted to get in particular, which is search functionality in the freight elevator kiosk and the item bank. Now, this is going to be the first step. Where we're starting is it's going to be a name-based search on the items, but it won't, for example, search on description names or like color, things like that. And it will be a fuzzy search, which means that you will be able to search for substrings of names. So you can, for example, have helmet, and that'll actually pick up a lot of different items which actually have the word helmet in the name. Or you can look up helm and still get most of those same or all the same results, but maybe a few other things which also include that. So I'm really excited about it. This is something that I remember talking about implementing search forever ago when we first originally introduced the inventory and then also the player asset manager knickknacks. It's something that we needed backend support for to do properly in order for it to not overburden the backend. But we actually got support from the backend team, which did a great job getting this in for us. So I think this will be a really good feature for the players, and hopefully that makes them feel a little bit better about waiting a little bit longer on the patch.
All in all, the upcoming changes to cargo and the combination of physicalized inventory with personal precision hangars means the upcoming Alpha 324 is the next major step forward towards players owning a place in the verse and configuring it however they'd like. And what else did we learn this week? The armistice zones are being removed from player hangars, which will finally let you load up those gun racks on your ships. That the law system will let you stand your ground when someone invariably tries to sneak in and steal all of your stuff. And that storage access kiosks are for long-term storage. And that decorating your hangar with all of your items is the next step in eventually letting you grab your kit and go without the need for those inventory screens at all. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. Thanks for letting us share the people and process of game development with you, and we'll see you all here next week.
So, a lot to unpack there, right? A lot to unpack. Great information. Maybe some of the whys it's been delayed, like the search functionality. That's huge. I'm okay waiting a couple of additional weeks or months than a whole year's worth of new patches for us to get the searchability, right? So I think the searchability is good. The last thing Jared said about the end state of not having inventory screens at all, super interesting. Like, what is that going to look like? Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in that Inside Star Citizen. But for me, it was a lot of the cosmetics. If you're not watching the video, they showed a corner of a personal hangar many times throughout that video that had like the Benny Hahn like vending machines stacked in a way that kind of outlined this little cove with like chairs and lights and a table with rifles on it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so as we're killing time between patches and waiting for 4.0 and waiting for 1.0 Star Citizen Live in Squadron 42, I'm probably going to spend a lot of time inside of my hangar. Absolutely. Okay, last segment for the night. Again, we will start getting into the ship manufacturer, lore deep dives, but I already told you about the ARC and focusing on that bonus episode and that prep work that was needed. But also the Whitley's Guide, the lore post that dropped on Tuesday, is about a ship. And so having like two sheep? After having two ship deep dives, like I also thought that was a good case just to move it to a subsequent episode. So, sharing my screen for those of you on YouTube one last time, let's get into the Whitley's Guide of the Anvil Carrack. Anvil Aerospace Carrack, the surprise. For over a century, the Anvil Carrack has been the most famous symbol of human exploration. Carrack-based explorers have pushed the boundaries of human civilization and made countless thrilling discoveries that have enhanced our knowledge of the universe. In 2822, however, its very existence was a shock to the system. Aerospace watchers were universally confused when the Carrack first appeared at the MacArthur Naval Base, Killian. Both because of the impressive nature of the ship and because of the sheer mystery as to where it had come from. While it's not unusual for the military to sponsor the development of a spacecraft in secret, it's such a difficult and expensive prospect that it's only ever done when it can impact the balance of power. Here was the first ever Corvette-sized, dedicated exploration ship in the Navy's inventory, and it had seemingly been birthed, fully formed, and ready for service. Speculation ran rampant that the Carrack must hide some sinister ulterior purpose, with suggestions including that it was a disguised electronic warfare ship, or that it carried a powerful new type of bomb. None were correct. The classification, since revoked, was instead intended to cover the need for the ship in the first place. In 2815, the UEEN cruiser Caraway was lost with all hands after being dispatched to chart unusual transmissions detected in a dense asteroid field in the Tohil system. The situation was an embarrassment for the Admiralty, which had previously debated the value of using warships for exploratory missions. The loss of the warship was reported as an accident, and warnings that its crew was not prepared for the mission were effectively covered up. A no-bid contract was awarded to Anvil Aerospace to secretly develop a dedicated explorer that could both replace and improve upon the missions, as they were currently being conducted by ships of the line. Wholly separate from the drama surrounding its creation, the UEEN Carracks immediately began what would become more than a century of expert survey work. Military Carracks logged hundreds of discoveries, including full surveys of countless moons, comets, jump points, and asteroid fields, as they continue to be actively produced and used today. Built as an explorer first, the Carrack has the shipboard facilities and crew stations to allow for an in-depth research missions while retaining the lower profile and necessary performance for facing particularly hazardous and uncharted reigns of space. Civilian service. The Carrack immediately attracted the attention of the galaxy as the perfect combination of military ruggedness and attractive, fully featured spacecraft design. Within a month of the launch of the first Carrack in UEEN service, Anvil Aerospace had recorded over 4,000 requests from organizations and individuals interested in their own ship. Anvil began petitioning the military to permit civilian sales at the conclusion of the initial 18-month construction contract in 28-25. The initial answer was a surprising no, due to the classified nature of its original design process. While Anvil considered the decision wrong and considered pushing for a review, they ultimately didn't want to endanger their status as a prime contractor for projects like the Hornet. It would take the eventual ouster of the original staff officers who classified the Caraway's destruction and several decades of waiting before the government would relent. In 2933, Anvil was finally authorized to develop a civilian edition of the Carrack. However, several requirements were made by the UEEN, including that sensor software be rewritten from the ground up, that it could not be produced in the same facilities as the UEEN holds. Development work began immediately but quickly lagged behind. The process of rebuilding the software proved difficult, and teams ran into issues adapting the ship's standard metrics, including aspects of seemingly simple things like the loading ramp's dimensions, towards civilian equipment. Prospective captains were encouraged to place a deposit on the initial wave of civilian ships because the first production run was expected to be slow. This sparked something of a Carrack craze, as planned future hull slots were purchased and traded. These owners carefully followed development of the civilian version through the various development delays. The first civilianized Carrack, later dubbed Sunny Boy by her crew, was handed over on February 21st, 2938, which Carrack user groups annually celebrate as an unofficial Carrack Day. Civilian Carracks and their crews quickly became seen as a symbol of humanity's best. Spacefarers dedicated to the noble and profitable goal of exploration rather than commerce or defense. Capsule histories. These capsule entries provide short histories of selected notable Carrack explorers. These are not comprehensive and do not represent the totality of the Carrack's long history of exploration, which would necessitate a dedicated volume. Note also that the UEEN does not formally christen Carracks. Instead, they are given either the designation R for research or S for survey, followed by a numerical designation. The leading 1 in the whole number identifies the size classification, like a 65 meter or greater, and the following digits are issued numerically. Details of Carracks belonging to specialty and or intelligence services are typically classified. So here's your first capsule. R11, the UEES Carrack. The first Carrack off the line in 2823, R11 was informally referred to as the Carrack by her crews in the first years of the UEEN's formal exploration efforts due to tool and die issues. She would not be joined by R12 until 2825. R11 made history by conducting the first ever close survey of a star system's icy exterior cloud, mapping 37 distinct points in the Killian system as part of a UEEN efforts to establish a new type of early warning system in aid of the military complex at MacArthur. No additional cloud surveys have been conducted since, indicating that the proposed system may not have been viable. S1132, called GQ12. Survey Carrack 132 entered service in 2831 and was assigned to long-distance survey missions along the Xi'an border at the former Perry Line. Popularly referred to by the call sign assigned for her final operation in 2836, Good Queen 12, the Carrack's last reported communication was a buoy check-in from an assigned patrol en route to the outer reaches of the Osiris system. After missing its next 2 scheduled reports, mission organizers dispatched search and rescue spacecraft that found no trace of S1132 in its assigned area. 30 years later, the fully intact Carrack was discovered on a moon in the Indra system. All the ship's systems were found to be functional, and her stores of food and medical supplies were largely intact, though there was no indication of the crew's whereabouts. Good Lord. Boccaccio. The Carrack explorer Boccaccio, commissioned in 2940, is Dr. Lorraine Kent's famed exploration ship. Boccaccio and her crew are famed for a series of historical wrecks discovered through what Kent describes as a combination of archival research, expert survey work, and sheer luck. Discoveries include the abandoned 22nd century colony transport Zephyr, the battle cruiser Braintree, and the impact site of Spider-Cat. Kent and her crew dedicate much of their time today in the search for and recovery of extrasolar military remains from past conflicts. And the last capsule, Gronald's Hope. Gronald's Hope was a 2948 civilian Carrack, which was issued an unusual kill-on-sight order by the Advocacy shortly after it entered service. The Carrack was identified entering the Kellogg system 3 days after the issue was ordered, and it was successfully intercepted by a contingent of mercenary pilots. Details of the reason for the kill order have never been released, although speculation is rampant that the government had received intelligence that the Gronald's Hope's crew had contracted some form of previously encountered plague. The Anvil Carrack. I actually liked, at first I was reading the last capsules, and I don't know, having the little snippets of stories For me, it seemed like a distraction of the overall article. Again, this is at first. The overall article is the history and how we got the Anvil Carrack and how it became civilianized. And then it goes into these very specific stories. So again, at first, I'm like, that's a little much, a little distracting. But then I started thinking about it. Isn't that perfect for describing an exploration ship? Like, one of the things me and my friends and, the Soul Provision members, one of the things we talk about all the time is this passion for exploration. Like the idea of hopping in an Odyssey, an Endeavor, a Carrack, and going to Pyro for the very first time. And maybe it's not mapped in your star map. Maybe you have to physically go and map out Pyro yourself before it just becomes live on your star map. As one example, right? Work with me here. There's something about the exploration loop, or the potential of the exploration loop, that excites me, right? It's like the precursor to the Soul Provision, logistics loop, right? Like, let's go find where the best places are to salvage and mine. And so hearing these capsule stories, it's like we're gonna have these memories, especially in the exploration loop, because you're exploring, you're uncharted territories, you're learning and seeing things for the very first time. Maybe it's a reconnaissance and a scouting mission, but again, it's that excitement of the unknown, and those become like the stories you talk about at Bar Citizen. Sure, there's a really awesome moment when I was doing a bounty hunting mission, or there's this really cool ship that I was salvaging, had this awesome backdrop, or however you want to get into it. Those are kind of redundant. Like the spirit of the story is kind of redundant. But when you get into the exploration of, like, I saw this mass in space, we decided to fly towards it, it took us an hour and a half to get there. While we were flying that direction, we went to the recreation room on the Mercury Star Runner and played some chess. When we finally got to the location, we came across a Vandal swarm, had to defend ourselves, and then after doing so, we scanned these masses and found 3 planets and a jump point to another location. Like, I could go on. I could go on. The exploration game loop is one that I'm looking forward to very, very much so. I have no idea what to expect from it. I have no idea. But I know that the Carrack has a drone room. We haven't been introduced to drones yet, but the Carrack has a drone room. And so this idea of that being like your base of operations in the atmosphere, or maybe outside of the atmosphere of a planet, deploying the drones, just to get eyes on the surface. It's exciting. It's exciting about where this game could possibly go. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. I think the overall spirit of this episode is find a way to kill time. Find a way to be positive, do what you can in the game when the servers are not on fire. And if the servers are on fire, join Soul Provision. Let's read a book together. Like, let's do some other things. Let's play that single player game that you haven't picked up in years, like Red Dead Redemption 2. You should all play Red Dead Redemption 2. But I think the community, a group, whatever org you're a part of, you just got to lean heavily into them while we wait for 324. Because when 324 drops and we're able to have org parties inside of somebody's personal hangar, I think that will be plenty to keep us enticed until 4.0 comes later this year. All right. If you want to become part of the conversation at the end of every episode over on Spotify, we do have a poll to respond to vote. And we do have a comment section. So if I said anything or brought up any topic that you want to respond to, provoke a question, anything, go to the comment section on Spotify to participate. You can join any of our socials across any social media platform at /BTV_cast. Most of what we do is over on Twitter because of the discussion and the back and forth and the polls that we can ask there. But we are also on Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok. right? If you want to watch these podcasts, go over to YouTube. It's /@BTV_cast, and then email us at contact@beyondtheversehq.com. Questions, comments, concerns, emotional outbursts, anything you want, and we will go into your email at the beginning of each episode as well. Join our in-game organization called Soul Provision at www.robertspaceindustriescom/orgs/provision. Again, we're talking all things Star Citizen there. It's friends. We're growing. We've also thrown in that book review called The Arc. There's a lot to do in that org, and we're just getting started. At 150 members at this current moment, our goal is to be able to operate 4 to 5 javelins. Let's do this. I hope this finds each of you well. Safe travels as you traverse beyond the verse. Take care, everybody.